So a very warm welcome to this joint LGA NALC People in Action event 25. I'm Chris Borg. I work as Policy Manager at NALC, that's the National Association of Local Councils, and I'll be chairing today's People in Action 25 online event. I'm also joined by Courtney Dudley from NALC, who will be helping with the technical side of things. So please let myself and Courtney know if you have any issues so that they can assist. Please post them, as I said, into the chat. We also have some fantastic speakers joining us to share their experiences, who I'll introduce shortly. Before that, I'd like to quickly run through a few housekeeping announcements, some of which are shown on the slide on the screen. I think keep an eye out for any notes also posted by my colleague into the chat at the start of the event. I can see we've got a diverse range of participants from across the country with us today. If you haven't already, please do use the chat to say hi and to let us know what you're hoping to find out more about today. And again, you can use the chat to interact with your fellow delegates or to share information or links throughout the event. Please feel free. Please also put any questions for our speakers into the Q&A function as we go along, so that we can make sure we get round to answering those during the Q&A session at the end, or towards the end of the event at least. We are recording the event and we'll share a copy with you after the event in the post-event mailings. There aren't any slide decks at today's event because it's not the format we use for what is, after all, more of a podcast style for these joint events, though we do use them for NALC only online events for other reasons. The chat and any other useful information. So the closed caption feature, subtitles, can be accessed by all attendees at any time during today's event. That's what I think my colleague has just posted a message about in the chat. My colleague's putting the instructions for that into the chat just now. And at the end of the event, we'll also be, of course, inviting your feedback on today. So please do look out for the feedback form, which should pop up on your screens once you've finished, which will be no later than 1:15. But we do appreciate your feedback and would really value that if you could do that, please. Next slide, please, Courtney. So moving on to the objectives, the aims and objectives of today and the format and the speakers. I think everyone has joined us now, or most people have who are going to be joining. So before I do introduce our speakers, I'll set some ground rules for our session and talk briefly about our objectives, as mentioned. There are three basic ground rules for today. This is a safe space for people to come together, share and learn about local government. We demonstrate respect for each other's lived experience in local government, and we leave party politics at the door. Please, that's certainly what we aim to do in the parish and town council sector as far as we can, and today as well, please. And our objectives for today's session, which I'm pleased to see align with what many people have said they want to get out today, are that the overall aim of the Be a Councillor and Make a Change campaigns is to encourage more people from all backgrounds and experiences to consider becoming local councillors at all levels of local government. We're aware that this is going on in the backcloth of local government reorganisation, which may reduce the number of levels of local government, but still at the more strategic level and the local level. And in the session, we're aiming to demystify the different levels of local government, what they do and how they can work together. That's now and in the future. Consider the roles and responsibilities of local councillors at the different levels of local government, and to understand the positive difference that new local councillors can make to their communities and why you should consider standing as members, the interested members of the public. And hearing from essentially today two inspiring councillors about their route into politics and how each of them interprets the role, as well as from Lee, who will be talking to us brilliantly about the officer side and his tremendous experience in that from Cornwall. So on to the speakers then. I'm thrilled to be joined today by a brilliant panel of speakers. That's Lee Dunkley, Chief Officer at the Cornwall Association of Local Councils, Councillor Rosie Radford, Mayor at Oswald Street Town Council up in Shropshire, and also a Shropshire councillor, and Councillor Jan Warwick, who is Deputy Leader of Hampshire County Council, and of course Cabinet Member up there as well. Firstly, I'm going to talk briefly about the crucial role that local councillors can play at the different levels of local government, and also talk about the differences between local, that's parish and town councils, and local authorities, i.e. at the moment, district, borough, county and unitary councils. Then we'll hear from each of our speakers in turn, and at the end of the session, we'll have time for a Q&A, as mentioned. Any questions or issues, please let me or Courtney know in the chat. Thanks. So we're running a bit early to time at the moment. So technically I'm sort of chairing and speaking, but not speaking for long, you'll be glad to hear. There are basically just a few points I'd like to mention about the crucial role of local councillors at different local government levels, and the difference between, if there are many differences, between local councils and principal authority councillors, a blend of which you've got today. So it's critical to know and understand the huge difference which local councillors can make to their communities at all levels of local government. They all have, tremendous roles to play. And here's why. Local councillors can help steer local funding, e.g. through the parish precept or council tax, to essential community projects, for example, by organising events, supporting community hubs, etc. Parish councillors are essentially volunteers. That may change a bit in future, but they're volunteers who tend to know the needs of the residents in towns and villages very well. They can often get things done very quickly, working in partnership with ward councillors, that's councillors at principal authority level, and other agencies and local partners. So local authority councillors at the higher levels tend to stand on a party political ticket, not always, but usually, and represent larger, what we call geopolitical areas or larger strategic areas than perhaps even the biggest town councils do at our level. They often have contacts, critical leverage with strategic players in a district, borough or county, meaning they can often garner wider assistance as needed if a problem or emergency hits a place. For example, flooding, issues with adult social care for a resident, that kind of thing. And you can be councillor at more than one level at once, and that won't change, with local government reorganisation going through. Although you'll see probably far fewer triple hatters, where some councillors are parish, district, or county councillors at the same time. They do exist, and they carry out often very well and in limited time different roles on each of those councils. So you can find out more information about councils in your area on the .gov.uk website. Quick overview for you of the different layers of local government in England across England's different 43 county areas. Parish and town councils, as we say, the most local layer in England. They've got about 10,000 in number within England, with approximately 100,000 parish and town councillors. They raise a precept, which is a kind of a form of council tax, you might know, for community use, but this is usually very small money or smaller money than principal authorities. Clerks are the officers who manage parish councils, working with councillors who represent the parish and town area. Borough and district councils represent bigger geopolitical areas than parish and town councils, and therefore their boundaries often contain several parish councils. These councils are usually predicated on historic boundaries, and they're often responsible for more strategic services such as waste collection or road management. And the biggest type of council, more of which you're going to see the creation of almost certainly in the future, county and unitary councils tend to represent much bigger geopolitical areas. County councils are often huge geographically or much larger, and if not, unitary councils can contain several borough or district councils and many more parish councils kind of underneath them. And they're often responsible for the most strategic services in an area, such as, for example, education. Stat attack here, just a point that Democracy Club, who did some brilliant research for NALC earlier this year on the May 25 elections, they think that around 35% of candidates standing in the parish and town elections in May 25 were female. So, clearly that does need redressing, that imbalance a bit, doesn't it, as we move forward. Right. Okay, 11 minutes sooner than expected. I'm going to start the interview now with yourself, Lee. So Lee Dunkley is, as I mentioned before, Chief Officer at the Cornwall Association of Local Councils. Done a fantastic job there. Tons of experience in the parish and town and local government sector. And I'm going to ask Lee a few questions now. Hence why there won't be any slide decks. So this is, as mentioned, more of a podcasty style, which has worked well in the last sort of 3 of these types of events, the last 2 years that we've done. So the first question, Lee, is if you could tell us more about or a bit about what a county association does within the parish and town sector, and how your local councils, how you support local councils in your area in Cornwall, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem. And thanks for having me on, Chris, and welcome and hello to everybody on the call. So at Cornwall Association of Local Councils, we support around about 200 town and parish councils across Cornwall. There are, I think, 40 to 45 county associations across England. When you become a member of a county association, you are also a member of the National Association, NALC, that are based in London. So at a Cornwall level, we provide advice on governance, finance and legal matters. We deliver training for councillors. We also deliver training for clerks when that is appropriate, and other officers. We act as a voice for local councils as well at regional levels and at national levels alongside NALC. So at a kind of a regional level, Cornwall Association work closely with Cornwall Council, which is one of those large unitary authorities that you were talking about, Chris. And that's particularly important that we have a good relationship with the unitary authority, because the unitaries and our sector, the town and parish councils, do need to work very closely together and need a good conduit and a good communication links. I've seen in some other parts of the country where this hasn't worked quite so well. So we think that's an integral part of our role at Calc to liaise with the unitary, not just with our members. So essentially, we exist to help councils run effectively and confidently, make sure that they've got the tools and the knowledge that they need to serve their communities as best they can.
Fantastically. I mean, I remember when, for example, Cornwall did go unitary all those years ago. Was it 2009? It could have been.
Yeah.
And it's, have you found that the fact that Cornwall, this is obviously an unscripted question, but just in response to what you've just answered, which is helpful, the fact that Cornwall is entirely parished, has that made the job of working with Cornwall Council easier or more difficult, do you think? One would assume more easy because of strength in numbers and that kind of thing, from your perspective.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yes, the Cornwall went unitary, as in the districts were effectively abolished in 2009. I didn't start working in local government in Cornwall until 2010, so I never worked under that regime. However, I've worked elsewhere in the country under the three-tier system. I would say that in my experience, working as one kind of united town and parish council sector in a two-tier scheme, so where there is only a unitary to deal with, strengthens quite significantly the role of town and parish councils. Having all of the areas in Cornwall parished is definitely a good thing. As you say, strengthening numbers. It's very easy to then say that town and parish councils as a sector do represent every single person in Cornwall. There are other counties that aren't entirely parished, and that does then allow other tiers of government to kind of poke holes in that if they were so minded to. So I would say it's definitely a stronger position to have all of your area parished.
Yeah, and of course, the same applies, doesn't it? In Wiltshire, Northumberland, the Isle of Wight, which are all pretty much now unitary. Bearing in mind, of course, the fact that they're all fairly large county areas, and the concept of remote government, etc. Not one that we all want to see much of. If there's just a very very large county without any kind of recourse 50 until the town hall being 50, 60 miles away, if there aren't any parishes, then in your place, how you do get community representation. So it's great that Cornwall's in that almost unique, but one amongst sort of four county areas that's got that, and that must be a great boon. Moving on, Lee, to the next question. So, from your experience of Cornwall's elections in May this year, I know you were very active, but can you share your reflections on how to encourage people to stand as local councillors, generally in any year? And were the excellent A5 size leaflets, which your association generated, amongst having a great web page, were they effective at all? Were they helpful?
Well, certainly helpful, I would say. We've still got the web page live if people want to go and have a look at it, cornwallalc.org.uk. From the homepage there, there's a link on the top right to our 2025 elections page. Probably remiss of me to still keep it up there, so it's a little bit kind of gone. But yeah, a whole raft of advice were put on there for practitioners in the run-up to the election, and for prospective candidates, members of the public that may wish to stand as well. Yes, we had leaflets, we had FAQ sheets. We attended a new councillor fair at County Hall, which was designed to for people that were interested in standing for Cornwall Council. But we were there as well, talking to people about making people aware of town and parish councils, whether that's encouraging them to stand, or just encouraging them to engage with them if and when they become Cornwall councillors. We saw lots of positive engagement. A lot of our councils in Cornwall put in a lot of effort to advertise the elections and the positions, and to sell what it is that councils do. We're particularly blessed in Cornwall because we have a very strong sector of town and parish councils that they do raise a lot of money and spend a lot of money, and invest a lot in local communities because of previous unitarisation and devolution and so on. Despite all of that, after the May elections, 20% of all of town and parish council seats were unfilled. And of I think there were around about 275 contested elections that could have taken place. About 20 to 25 did. So the take up is that's lower as well than the last round of elections, which was in 2021. So it's a challenge, and I'm glad that NALC and the LGA are running these campaigns, and that we have members of the public or standing councillors on calls like this. It's really, really important. I would say some tips kind of to try and get the message out is we can produce all of the leaflets in the world and go to events and do social media posts, and that is going to be helpful. But what really makes a big, big difference is personal contact. It's councillors and clerks saying to their neighbour or whoever, you'd be great at this. Here's some cool stuff that our local council has done. Here's what you could do. So yeah, we need more enthusiastic people right across the sector, across the country.
And what you said was borne out by, I think, the clerk of Carnbray Parish Council, who spoke at the first of these two events back on the 17th of October during local, European Democracy Week, and echoed exactly the same thing, that personal relationships, personal contacts are key. And I'm not entirely sure what the size of Carnbray Parish Council is, but you get the impression it's very rural, as presumably are many of the parish councils in Cornwall. But even more so, probably there, the personal relationships, the contacts, the networks, etc., really are going to be what does it, especially if some of these places are sparsely populated. I don't know, but obviously, roughly 70% of parish councils are rural by a government department definition. We once kind of gauged. So, but yeah, I mean, you make some excellent points, and hopefully we'll see the creation of some of parish councils in more urban areas too, and that would be no less true, wouldn't it? That the personal relationships are key. But I think that using social media is something that you guys did, and also Carnbray I know did on Facebook, to try and target younger people to stand for election as well. So you can almost target and use different means, horses for courses, can't you? Moving on, Lee. LGA research suggests that often people who are already involved in their local community in some way do have great transferable skills that they can bring to the role of a local councillor, whatever level. Well, what do you think are some of the key skills people can bring from other roles, and what are the key things that people can learn from being a local councillor? Not suggesting that there might be a kind of an identikit job description for a councillor, but presumably there are some key or core skills.
Yeah, I'd say if I was writing a person spec for a counsellor, it would be that you care about your community and you want to be there to be proactive and to make a difference. And actually, everything else is incidental. Although, people that are active in their communities do often have fantastic skills in things like communication, problem solving, teamwork, really, really key, and of course, local knowledge. Um, there are plenty of other skills that can be brought to the table on things like budgeting or having a key eye for finance, project management, potentially. Not that you go into be a counsellor to manage projects, but you do go in there to understand the things that are taking place and then to discuss and make decisions on those. And if you've been working in customer service or dealing with the public in any way, that's always going to be very helpful. I think counsellors, people can learn from being a counsellor. You can learn things like or increase your confidence in public speaking, decision making, understanding how local government works, influencing change. These skills are valuable everywhere. But I would emphasise that there are no prerequisites for being a town or parish councillor other than you care about your community. Our tier of government, in fact, pretty much all tiers of government, are designed so that lay people can come in with best intentions to judge, make judgments on the information around them, discuss and make decisions for what they feel is best for the community. So you're not expected to be an expert on any one particular thing or anything at all, in fact.
Brilliant, and yeah, that really does nail it down to the one key essence, doesn't it? Which is that you care for your community, and that you're prepared to make the time, to demonstrate that care and to work with people to get projects done. You're right. I mean, from the experience I've picked up at at town council level, within this sector, it's kind of like there are bigger budgets at town council level, and perhaps in some of the smaller parish councils. Most small parish councils tend to have budgets of under 25k. But equally, if you didn't care for your community, there would be little point in sort of trying to deliver projects in any size of community. Whether that's your ward, your town, or your parish, and it's obviously the key concept you've nailed there, Lee. But I think from our end, it is useful, certainly certainly at town council level, if you've got other skills and experience to bring in, like project management, knowing perhaps based on previous experience how money can be efficiently spent on community projects always goes down, really well. But not to be put off if you haven't got much of that experience. It's the door is always open. Thanks for that, Lee. That's great. Moving on to the next kind of set question. So in essence, you've covered some of this already, but what support is available generically for town, parish, and community councillors once they are elected? I think someone may have posted a post in the chat there about whether or not new councillor training is mandatory. Did you want to touch on any of that, Lee?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's plenty of support around. So NALC and CALC membership, it's a subscription kind of membership service. So if your council is a member of CALC and NALC, and I think in most areas, we're talking like 95% of councils are, there's a whole raft of guidance, support, training available, designed for brand new councillors. So we went through elections 6 months ago. We have trained so there are we think about 1,700 town parish councillors in Cornwall at the moment. We've trained about 1,000 of those in the last 6 months on code of conduct, which is a really key one to get under your belt as soon as you become a councillor. Clerks. Clerks are the professional officers, so you're not expected to be an expert in anything, particularly local council kind of protocols and administration, but you do have someone at your council that is expected to be fairly knowledgeable in that, and that is the clerk and sometimes other officers as well if you're in a bigger council. They will be there to guide you as well. It is a key part of their role to guide you. So you've got support from in-house from your own council, support from CALC and NALC. The clerks have support as well from the Society of Local Council Clerks, and we always recommend that all clerks are members of that organisation, and all councils are members of NALC and CALC as well. In terms of mandatory, was it mandatory new councillor training? There isn't. So, and it's a bone of contention and has been for, as long as I've been in the sector, really. You can't become a school governor without going through some mandatory training. You can't become a unitary councillor without going through some mandatory training. Yet at town and parish council levels, there isn't actually a mandated kind of legally required level of training, even though some town councils are now spending in excess of £6 million a year. In Cornwall, it's written into our code of conduct that councillors must undertake code of conduct training within 6 months of taking office. And so effectively not undertaking that training would constitute a breach of the code of conduct. So that effectively mandates it. But that's as far as it goes at the moment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the point that's been made at this end before is that, of course, there are different types of training, aren't there? I mean, certain types of training on a principal authority, like licensing or planning, you'd have to do before you were given a seat on those committees, wouldn't you? And presumably they're also dealing with, I'm guessing, larger amounts of money on bigger developments. Still, you're absolutely right. I think new councillor training is one of the types of training I think we identified 2 or 3 years ago that should be mandatory. Around the same time as you sign the code of conduct, because and probably also chairmanship training or something like that. So I think that's what we've picked up before, Lee, which chimes with your, what you were saying there. Final question, which I'm glad we were able to ask, Lee, is what advice would you personally have for anyone really, people, members of the public, considering putting themselves forward for election? You've touched on some of that before, but any general sparks of wisdom from you?
Well, I just coming at the context, I've never been a councillor, but I've been working in the sector. So just add in that caveat. But my advice would be don't underestimate what you can bring to the table. You do not need to be an expert in law or finance or anything at all. You just need to care. You just need to care about your community and want to make a positive difference. I would suggest that you talk to your local council, you attend council meetings, ask questions. You'll be able to see what the process kind of looks like, and give it some time as well. It may seem that some of the processes are a little antiquated or bureaucratic, and indeed some of them are, but that is freeing up and changing, and you can be a part of that change. You can be a part of making a difference in your community and making a difference in the council as an entity as well.
Brilliant stuff, and I think that you've covered that off all really, really well. I've certainly got a huge, hugely accurate picture now from what you said, Lee, of what happened back in May. Certainly amongst county associations, you were one of the most active, and it's always great to see. And especially, though it's really positive in many ways, I think almost harder, isn't it, if you've got seats to fill on more parish councils being fully parished. So, all the more important for a county association to have a really good strategy, work with principal authority or principal authorities in their patch, and encourage people to stand in general. But yeah, hopefully, some of the people today on today's call or event will be encouraged whenever their next round of elections are to stand or think about standing and find out more, either from their political party if they're higher tier, or not if they're town and parish level, about standing. But huge thanks, Lee. 1 minute early we finished there. That's great. Massive thanks. We'll bring you in again during the Q&A session later. And moving on, it's Rosie, it's your turn. So Councillor Rosie Radford is Mayor at Oswestry Town Council, does a brilliant job there, and is also a Shropshire councillor. So fantastic that we've got somebody who knows exactly what it's like to be a councillor at both levels of local government. Shropshire is, of course, unitary, not entirely parished like Cornwall is, but I think it's just bits of Telford, isn't it, Rosie, that aren't parished. So similarities perhaps with Leeds Patch. And we're going to ask you some of these questions now. So, and a couple of probably impromptu ones, if that's all right, as we go along for the next 10 minutes. So, Rosie, introducing you, when did you decide that becoming a councillor at either level really was something that you wanted to do?
Thank you, Chris, and thank you to everybody. And I'm here from a very wet Welsh border town of Oswestry today. I have a background in human resources professionally, and I did A-level politics, and I kind of informally ended up being chairs of little committees in my communities, and it became obvious that actually I quite enjoyed chairing committees. I quite enjoyed empowering people. I really cared, and Lee's talked about caring an awful lot, and it's absolutely true. So you take some of those things and those skills, and you think, actually, there's a possibility. There's a possibility I could have a seat at the table. There's a possibility that I could represent my community and have a different outlook to some of the other councillors that might currently be there. So I think I tried a couple of times as an independent, but I think becoming affiliated to a political party certainly helped. And I think you should just start talking to people. And I think for me, it's one of those jobs where it's a bit of a rarity because you get to try before you buy. You can go and sit in a council meeting quite easily and see the process, see the people, see the challenges, see the ups and the downs. So that's what did it for me. So.
No, so is there almost, do you think, Rosie, kind of personality type? It's what that would a caring person, type of personality that would be best fitted to this role at whatever level, or is that being too general?
No, absolutely not. I think there's caring, but I think there's also like the desire to challenge and the desire to see if something else is possible and just bring a different point of view. Oswestry Council has 18 councillors, and this year we changed from a council where everybody had been in post for several years to actually only 5 of our 18 councillors had any previous experience. But you bring all of those councillors into a room with such a mix of amazing experience and knowledge and passion for their local communities.
Fantastic. So yeah, so what you essentially, everyone has skills, making those, the most of those skills, caring for your community, caring for your place. There is this thing that's coming up at the moment, as you know, about local government reorganisation and in particular parishing on unparished areas. And I know the local government commission, boundary commission for England, have got views on this as well about where a community defines its own place as and placemaking and all of that, and that's something going on with at the moment with a lot of the current government's agenda. So I think a lot of what you're saying, it speaks to placemaking skills, doesn't it? And is something which even communitarians who don't live in a current parish council area can actually also use if they're wanting to create a new parish council, or if they're wanting to have something more permanent, more statutory that can spend money in their patch and deliver community projects more. Now that's brilliant. Okay, so speaking more about yourself, Rosie, very general open-ended question here. What does your day-to-day tend to look like if you are a sort of a dual-hatted councillor, as it were? There's another question on that later on, but basically, what is your what does a day in the life of Rosie Radford kind of look like?
It starts as being a parent to teenagers, and then it quickly evolves to checking my diary to see, am I being a Shropshire councillor today, which might involve me chairing a health scrutiny committee, or being on the fire authority, or being in a council meeting or a planning meeting, or does that involve actually after hours being as an Oswestry councillor, or does it involve meeting communities during the day and empowering them and helping them to apply for grants, or meeting them and understanding their needs and what they're doing in our community? So it can be completely and utterly varied, and I think that's probably what I really like about it, because no 2 days are the same. and that variety is really important. But the running thread through all of it is a desire to help, a desire to care, a desire to link people to signposting, to minis, to people, to other things that will help our community grow and become more resilient. So.
No, absolutely. And as a consequence of that, do you tend to think, again, an unscripted question, but do you tend to find that the days when you're being a Shropshire councillor vary a lot from being a mayor of Oswestry, or are there similarities?
No, no. Shropshire Council very much is very structured, very specific, very agendaed, very strategic, very high level. Whereas, and that's through the kind of meeting structure. As a Shropshire councillor at community level, very much is about engaging with the town council that I represent and engaging with the communities. But Mayor of Oswestry, Town Councillor of Oswestry is very much closer to the line of meeting people, helping people, signposting people, and actually making decisions that affect a much smaller place. So we have just taken on the ownership of Fluid Mansion in Oswestry, which is a Grade 1 listed heritage building in all its glory in the centre of Oswestry, and actually being able to have a direct impact upon saving that for the community and for years to come is really important. So it feels like at town council level, we are closer to making that direct impact for our community, and that's really important.
Yeah, so perhaps it's more immediate being a parish and town councillor, and necessarily, as you'd expect, more strategic. At that high level, covering the bigger area there. No, that's really interesting. And leading on to that, at both levels there, really, Rosie, what do you think are the highs and lows of being a councillor?
I would always remain positive. I think the lows are sometimes the process, and I think both yourself and Lee have touched upon the democratic process sometimes, and sometimes it takes longer than you'd like to. And especially for Oswestry, a lot of our boundaries are covered by Shropshire Council, our highways are covered by Shropshire Council currently. And some of the services within our town are covered by Shropshire Council. So when you are building relationships with the unitary authority and you are trying to make decisions across those two areas, sometimes things take a little bit longer. I think there are challenges when perhaps the public's perception of decision making or the public's perception of the workings of a council aren't necessarily as accurate as it could be. But I think that the highs are very much that opportunity when your town clerk bursts through the door and says, we've been given this national lottery funding, we can actually make a real big difference to our community, or we've signed on the dotted line for a building and that means our youth provision becomes more concrete and more long term, or we've just had members of the public coming into a council meeting who have voiced their concerns, and actually we've managed to allay those concerns quite happily in a council meeting in a public forum. So on all of those counts really are some of the absolute highs of being a councillor. And yet you can walk in and it doesn't matter whether you wear a t-shirt and shorts for your day job or a shirt and tie for your day job. Actually, you still have the ability to have that direct impact for your community. So those are the absolute highs.
No, that's really interesting. So the highs, may actually be similar to the types of high that you can get as a parish town councillor to being a Shropshire councillor, but there may be more local highs, maybe more local satisfaction in the way you talked about saving Fluid Mansion. Whereas you seem to be implying that actually it's a different type of satisfaction, working at that high level more strategically because the challenge is different. Yeah. Moving on, Rosie, you've touched on this already, kind of thing, but are there any other comments you'd want to make about how you do manage the work of being mayor of what we call a super council, which is a £1 million plus sort of spender in the sector? I know that there are others in Shropshire, and I think Cornwall, Lee has about 6 or 7 of them, doesn't it? mainly in the unitary areas, it's got to be said, actually. So you've obviously got to be very organised, but are there any other skills you've got to have to be, fulfil those roles?
Yeah, I think there are lots of skills, but actually, I think I would concentrate more on the support that you get from officers and fellow councillors that make it happen. Oswestry, like you said, is a super council, and we have a precept that's not even a quarter of what our budget actually is. So we are not reliant on our precept, but we make decisions on a lot of money. But actually, none of that could be done without having a very skilled, a very steady-handed town clerk who is willing to explore any possibilities that councillors might come up with. Council officers and civil and democracy officers that are there to organise your time about what you need to read, where you need to go. And equally, scrutiny officers and council officers at Shropshire Council are very well experienced and knowledgeable at seeing councillors come and go, and that support that they can give you and that steer that they can give you. I think that's how you survive. I think, Lee and yourself have both touched upon the fact that you can walk in without any experience whatsoever, but you are steered and helped and supported by some really strong officers, and that's what we've got in Oswestry and at Shropshire.
Well, certainly, vouch for what you say about Aaron at Oswestry. Does a fantastic job. He's a member of our climate emergency network. In fact, he and I think one of your project officers spoke at the most recent, session of that back in October, and does a fantastic job. Very, very sterling supporter of Shropshire Association and of NALC. So just to finish off, Rosie, it's fascinating. I'll blend these two questions together then, really. What advice would you have for people considering putting themselves forward for election, maybe next year or in future years? And just if you want to throw in anything, maybe it's to imagine, maybe it's not, but what are you most proud of in your time as a councillor, at either level? But yeah, if you want to try and cover those brief bullets off, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to start with the most proud, I think. And I think the most proud part is, as a mayor, being able to meet groups that are not necessarily the most well known, the most vocal, but actually are consisting of volunteers. And I think I write a 3-monthly article and done various speeches, and they've all outlined the fact that volunteers basically run Oswestry. If it weren't for our volunteers plugging the gaps around wellbeing, welfare, support, youth provision, etc., we would struggle. And so the opportunity to meet those people that are not formally employed but are giving up their time and expertise, that's what's really important, and that's what makes me incredibly proud of Oswestry and incredibly proud of the job I do, because I get to represent those people and I get to give them a voice. I think Llwyd Mansion definitely is a reason to be very proud to get over that starting line of a long-term project and getting some National Lottery funding, which means we can save a grade 1 listed building. It is really important. I think also proud of the fact that we stood on the 1st of May or some days afterwards with a brand new council, with a brand new outlook and a brand new passion for changing Oswestry and improving Oswestry for the better. So I think in terms of joining a council, I think, like I said earlier, you can turn up at a council meeting and see what it's really like, whether it's a unitary or a local parish and town council meeting. You get to see what it's like. But if you've ever walked around your community goes and thought to yourself, oh, I wish that was different, or why have they not thought about this? Take that and bring it into a council meeting. It isn't the best paid job in the world, but it's a job where you get to represent your views, your community's views, and just a different outlook. And you are given all of the training and support you will ever need to do that job and to do it really, really well. So that's really important. Anything is entirely possible if you question and if you care.
No, that's it. So an inquiring mind as well as a caring personality is what you seem to be, implying. And I'm sure that the delegates here at this event today have got those as you have, Rosie, in spades. So thanks so much for that. That's really interesting, and very thorough answers there. Inspirational. Thanks so much, and we'll bring you in during the questions in a bit. Thank you so much. Right, introducing Councillor Jan Warwick now, who's Deputy Leader of Hampshire County Council. And you know, of course, like Rosie is also a county councillor. Jan, huge thanks for joining us today. I know you're very busy, and you can ask you just a few questions here about your different roles. You must be, as Rosie, incredibly busy. But Jan, what did prompt you to put yourself forward for election as a councillor, Hampshire County Councillor in the first place? Were there any kind of overriding reasons or inspirations to do that?
That's a very good question, Chris, because I asked that question over and over again. Why did I ever stand? I stood actually as a parish councillor initially. And I think it was an issue. I live in a small village. It was an issue with the road and speeding cars, which I think is something that gets a lot of people involved and interested. And people are saying, why can't the parish council do something about this? So rather than kind of do that, I joined and we set up a speed watch, which was very interesting, and that led to something around developing average speed cameras. So having stood on the parish council for 6 or 7 months, it was my MP said, you should consider standing for election to district council. So I kind of don't like to say no. So I went, yeah, that's fine, I'll do that. And I had no real idea what a district councillor really did or how you go about standing for election. And as Rosie said, it's people who are motivated and sort of want to do good things, and politics isn't really relevant, I would say. It's about being motivated to make a change. And I knocked on doors and I was very nervous. I didn't sleep the whole night before I went out knocking on doors, thinking, what am I going to say? What if they ask me about national fiscal policy or something I don't really understand? And actually, it's not about that. It's about listening, isn't it? It's saying, you know, what would make a difference to your community? If you could change things, what would you do? And it was the most interesting experience for me. I got then elected to a district council, didn't really know what they did, and got given a brown envelope and took it from there. And someone said to me on my first meeting, don't speak for 18 months, which is hard for me because I speak a lot. And I think there's sort of various rules, but actually speaking is really important. And again, I was nervous about that because I thought, what if I don't understand what they're talking about? But as councillors, you are a representative of the community, whatever that looks like. So it doesn't matter if you don't understand everything, really. You just want to share your views and be the voice of common sense, I suppose. So that's how I started off. That was 14 years ago. So at one point I was a triple hatter. I dropped the parish after being a district cabinet member for environment, and then standing for county, winning that seat, and then on the county cabinet. And Chris, one of the difficult things for me is that most parish council meetings are in the evening. Most district council meetings tend to be in the evening. So you can do that alongside a normal day-to-day job. And I was a pharmacist in the NHS, so I had a full-time job up to that point. Standing for county, and I've got 3 youngest children, standing for county as well, most of their meetings are in the daytime. So that is a real challenge. And I would say, I don't know how most unitaries work, but that is a bit of a barrier for people who've got jobs, who've got young families and got a household ever to run, to do those daytime council roles, which they're not properly paid and they're certainly not pensioned. So that is an issue if you're not working or not able to work because of that commitment.
Understood. Yeah, no, it's interesting. I didn't know some of that. That's absolutely fascinating, and certainly didn't know, Jan, that you've been a parish councillor. So it's brilliant to have you along today to speak to a like-minded audience. Moving on, Jan. What is your favourite part of being a councillor kind of now? And a county council deputy leader. Are there any overlaps between the two? You mentioned you're obviously a cabinet member.
I think there are. So it's definitely getting things done. So I think Rosie and I are probably quite similar in that we tend to want to do positive things. So it's really nice to get that grant or to be able to say, yes, I've got this kind of the big expectation for me is things take longer in local government than you think. So it's not a yes, no, let's do it. And probably that's a good thing. Otherwise, we'd be doing all sorts of schemes without proper consultation and thought. So it feels to me like everything takes 10 years to do. So, if I want a new crossing, it's not going to happen next year or the year after. It's probably going to be 4 or 5 years or longer, potentially 8 or 9, to get funding in place, to get the needs right. So a lot of schemes, unless they're urgent sort of strategic transport schemes, can take a very long time to deliver. My proudest thing, I think, was I was involved in a new leisure centre. So I live in Winchester. Our leisure centre was built in the 70s. The roof wasn't safe. It was a dreary building. There was a huge demand on it. So I got involved in a campaign to build a new leisure centre with a 50-metre swimming pool. And if I got told once, I got told a million times, we don't need a 50-metre swimming pool. There's no need for it. There's no need for it. So that took a lot of my skills, persuading, sort of consultation, trying to find the money, but it's now built and it's open, and we've got a 50-metre pool. And then I had this slight nervousness that what if nobody comes? So, I've been behind trying to build this thing, which could end up being a white elephant. Actually, it's amazing. And they hold regional competitions there for swimming, as well as all sorts of lessons. So, and we have a hydrotherapy pool, so that's serving injured servicemen from the army. So there's great positives. So something like that is a massive win. But most councillors wouldn't perhaps be able to develop something like that. I think probably the proudest is every time I go over that crossing, whether I walk over it. Sometimes people going the other way will say thank you, and that means the most, I think. So it's the smaller things, but something you've actually got involved with and developed yourself.
No, absolutely fantastic. Yeah, and because you've answered that final question in terms of the set questions about what you were most proud of, in your time as councillor and as council deputy leader. Time to ask the final kind of. I'll merge these two together. Really, Jan. We've slightly overrun, I think, from earlier on, but what support and training have you been able to access since you were elected, really, at any level over the last 14 years, and how's it supported your role? Really, I guess you could apply that to parish, district, or county. The kind of training you've had and the kind of support you've had to enable you to deliver those achievements.
I think there's a lot of formal support, and you always. I mean, we do a lot of mandatory training, so some of that's in a lecture type environment where you can ask questions, which is probably the most helpful. Sometimes we get an online package, so safeguarding, for example, something like that, and all of that training is really useful. And it's amazing how I've done so many different roles. So over 14 years, there's not much I haven't come across at some point, but you do learn from exceptional individuals as well. So I think that advice to keep my mouth shut for 18 months was well meant, but actually there was some structure in that I could learn from leaders who I was proud to learn from. And although I won't have all of those skills, you certainly know how to manage your portfolio, your interactions with members of staff and other councillors, perhaps from experience. So there is quite a bit of training. On the other hand, you do feel sometimes you're thrown in. I opened an awful lot of broom cupboards at the county council before I found the room I was intending to go to. So the scale of a county compared to that parish is huge. And the scale of your interactions is very different as well. So there is a huge amount of learning, but you are usually within a group that will be supportive as well. So no one should feel they're on their own.
Absolutely not, and that would, as you rightly say, apply at parish, district, and county level. That's absolutely the case, and through the parish sector, certainly with, as Lee said, the county association, and indirectly through NALC. Final question for you, Jan. You may have touched on it before, but you're obviously on the cabinet. You're obviously very talented there at Hampshire County Council. How challenging, is it being the exec member for Hampshire 2050 Finance? Is that more challenging in its way than being a kind of divisional representative for Hampshire County Council?
Yeah, I mean, and council funding is a well publicised topic at a county level. There's a huge pressure from something called adult social care, which you could have a blank checkbook and you still wouldn't have enough money for that because it's a demand-led service, and it's the same for children's special care and special educational needs. Those are the bigger challenge for any upper tier or unitary authority, and our budget challenges are sort of well explained. I think for all county councils and upper tier authorities will be in a very similar position in that you don't have full control. So government still decides on the levels of grants, your council tax precept. So you can never quite live within your means in the way that you could with a household budget. There's so much external influence on you. So we're dependent on on grants. There's something called the Fair Funding Review formula going through at the moment, which will affect some rural large counties very differently than it will the sort of inner city authorities. So you never quite know what government, whatever colour of the government, you never quite know what they're going to do or how much they will listen. And it's the same with the NHS, you know, where you've got a demand-led service. You can never really fully control that demand. And yet at the end of each financial year, we have to present a balanced budget. So you'll hear a lot about that. You'll hear about it in the budget in November, and you'll hear again in February when councils set their budgets for the coming year. And of course, the whole devolution government reform is adding a sort of an additional layer of interest to all that financial debate. So yes, it's a very interesting role for me.
Fantastic. No, that's really interesting. Thank you so much, Jan. Really inspirational character. And you know, again, to hear that you've been a parish councillor there as well, really just does reinforce that actually, you know, caring for the community is a golden thread through the very respective levels of local government. Thank you so much. And also that's been reinforced, I think, you know, common messaging coming from Rosie and as well from Lee, thanks to our fantastic, you know, speakers there. Now, moving on, it's 5-1. Hopefully I gave you know, each of the speakers enough time to answer the set questions there, and hopefully delegates derived something from that. I know I certainly did. Some of you have posted questions into the Q&A, and if any of you read the Q&A and particularly like any, you can upvote them by you know, giving thumbs up to them, and it tends to be the ones that have the most thumbs up which get asked. Slightly less time to ask Q&A today, so unlike at a normal NALC event where we allocate pretty much the final 15 minutes or so to Q&A. But if we can avoid making statements and we can sort of keep our questions general and shortish so that I can put them to the entire panel, not just one speaker, that'd be helpful. So there is just there's a question here at the top, which is from Nigel Canham. Thanks for that, Nigel, who asks an interesting question without us being partisan about it. But independent candidates have no party machine to help with campaigning. Any tips? I'm not quite sure whether that could be applied to town council level. We know that party politics does apply. The parties have some groupings on town councils. But I'm guessing, Jan and Rosie, this would more readily apply at county council level. Starting with you, Jan, any tips here, or is that something you don't want to answer?
No, I think it's a really interesting question. The only thing I would say, the only positive thing I would say about the party politics, whatever your party politics is there a bit of a process of selection for candidates. So by and large, you'll get somebody half normal within a party political selection. And I always think the motivation for independence is probably harder to justify why you want to do that. So that was the only caveat I would say in that's probably a good reason for the party political. But the cost of running election, unless you're able to run leaflets and run a very structured campaign, is very difficult for an independent.
No, absolutely. And I'm aware that the LGA, Jack from the LGA here, also has an independent group. But did you want to make any general comments on that, Jack?
Well, I wanted to point out the independent group that we have. So the LGA is there to support principal authorities, and we have political group offices not just for all of the major parties, but also for independents. And as well as being able to provide tips and support on campaigning, they're also able to provide events and training programs and things for those once they get elected, which can be useful not just for learning how to improve your role, but also networking with other independent councillors, which can further help with getting tips on campaigns and things like that.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Yeah, some of that chimes there with what Jan was mentioning. Rosie, any comments in terms of Nigel's question there?
I think I took this question as being the practicalities of campaigning, and I tried to campaign as an independent councillor twice, and I think what I learned is actually having lots of leaflets is really helpful, but actually being known in your community is even more helpful. So whatever your political stance is, and being an independent is fine. But if you are doing something in your community and there's plenty of people that can see what you're doing in your community and you're helping, word of mouth is far more important. So you can get elected as an independent if you can get that reach out to people.
Understood. Yeah, and I'm sure that would apply actually as well, irrespective of the party machine that you maybe belong to, if you're local. Lee, any comments there? Response to Nigel's question?
I think Rosie's right in what she said. You know, making a difference in your local community if you're well known and well liked, that should go beyond. It doesn't always work like that, but it is different in different parts of the country. In Hampshire, it may be very much a party, party politics kind of rules, and is a strength when it comes to campaigning. In Cornwall, there's a very significant independent kind of grouping. So, in the context of Cornwall, putting independent on the ballot paper is probably a strength rather than a weakness. But that's the current climate. I don't really have anything more to add on to that, though, because I've never been a candidate myself.
No, what we have noticed, though, in the past is when we produce an annual elections report based on the parish elections and the Democracy Club data, which they produce for us. We published that, I think, earlier than we normally would. This year that was published in sort of August, about for the May 25 elections, and invariably, there are some advantages, certainly at town council level. It's worth saying. I don't know about principal authority level, but I think maybe Jen was hinting at it, which is that if you're standing for a political party at kind of a super council level, in some respects like Rosie's, or certainly at principal authority level, having that party infrastructure behind you can be an advantage, and is an advantage certainly financially over potentially being an independent. But then also can increase candidacy, can increase contested elections, not always, but has been known to, and also can also increase in certain cases turnout. So I think not always the case. You're right, Lee, there are exceptions. Let's move on. There's a really good question here, which has been posed by Alistair Jones, which is, what is the biggest disincentive to people standing for a parish and town council, and how can that be overcome? While you're on, Lee, I'll put that to you if that's okay.
I think perhaps not knowing what town and parish councils are and what they do. There's, barely a week goes by without me talking to, whoever I'm talking to, and having to describe that town and parish councils are not what you've seen on the Vicar of Dibley, and that's the thing that we're battling against, and have been for forevermore, I think. So I would say the biggest barrier or disincentive to people joining a town and parish council is not knowing what it is and what it does, and how much change that can be affected there.
Brilliant, thanks very much. No, the Vicar of Dibley concept is one that we've been for a long time at this end trying to combat. Moving on to yourself there, Jan, did you have any observations in answer to Alistair's question there?
I think following on from that, you may become frustrated if you can't achieve everything that you thought you might be able to. If you don't understand the full role of what they can actually achieve, I think that could be a frustration. But there's also that time commitment as well. It's that evening meetings and staying with it, really. So there's always quite a bit of reading to do. I'm quite often reading papers, on the train and getting interrupted, or at night time when I'm tired. And so being well prepared, so making informed decisions. You can't just turn up and sort of vote. You need to have read the papers, and obviously the higher the level of the authority, the more reading there will be to do. And sometimes those pages run to hundreds. So there's a lot of information and prep around actually just more than just turning up for meetings. So that could be a disincentive. So you need to know what you're signing up for, I think.
No, absolutely, which is exactly implicit in what Lee was saying too. And the fact that, of course, that within the parish and town council sector, within that number, that 10,000 spectrum, there are huge disparities in terms of the size, budgets, population ranges of council. The smallest parish council is somewhere based in Leicestershire was 150 people. You compare that with and local government organisation, as you rightly said before, Jan, may well create even bigger ones, but can create, Northampton Town Council, and which also has a electorate size or population of 120,000 or something. So it's a huge disparity. So knowing what even within our sector, our level of local government, providing an identikit kind of template that to the services that those councils all provide is almost impossible. Rosie, any final observations on Alistair's question?
I think a disincentive could be in terms of the vulnerability that you become, or the exposure that you have to the press and public. You become very public very quickly, and your decisions are reflected in social media, in discussions in communities, and almost that exposure can be quite overwhelming at times. I think being at county level and working a number of hours that without a pension definitely has an impact. And I think going back to Lee's point about people not necessarily understanding what the role is and what you have, and equally Jan's point of people not necessarily seeing the process and the time taken. But I think if you can highlight these are the decisions our councillors have made. These are the real-time, real-life questions that have been posed and the answers that we've given, then actually that gives you a reason to do it. So there are lots of reasons why it's maybe a little bit scary, but it's absolutely worth doing.
No, absolutely, and that seems to be coming loud and clear through all three of you, and on the officer side too. Whose jobs, like myself and Lee, nationally and locally, it is to try and encourage that kind of candidacy. Listen, I think we'll just do one final question. My final kind of pieces to say towards the end of the event aren't very long, but we've got time for one final question, which is from Sylvia Carrington. Thanks, Sylvia, for posting that. Which is that any advice for specifically supporting and encouraging greater diversity and representation amongst councillors running in parish elections at all? That's exactly what today's about, precisely, and it's the aim. I'm going to bring you in a second, Jack, to talk about the Be a Councillor campaign, because that is one of the aims of the Make a Change campaign, which is NALC's kind of long-running elections campaign. So before I bring the speakers in to answer that one, Jack, did you have any kind of general tips from the Be a Councillor campaign you wanted to kind of import to this?
Well, I'd point out that the Be a Councillor campaign is mainly for principal authorities, not for parish level. But on that level, the Be a Councillor campaign runs alongside multiple external partners such as Elect Her, Operation Black Vote, Fit for Parliament, where you can go along as a member of the public to any of their events and find out the various different ways that if you're from any of these different diverse backgrounds, you can become a councillor. There's lots of resources out there to help people to represent their local community.
Fantastic. Jan, any tips and answer to Sylvia's question?
I think becoming a parish councillor is probably one of the best things you can do if you have any ambitions for progressing up as a district or county councillor or unitary councillor or even an MP. It's absolutely brilliant, and I don't see any particular barriers to that. I think it's a fantastic opportunity. Where I see the barrier is more at the county level, because if you're taking up a sort of cabinet role, it's daytime meetings, and that tends to mean people are retired because they're the ones that can give the time, and I don't feel that reflects the best demographic it should potentially. But the answer to that would probably be, even if we were paying more or contributing to pensions, because that's the big risk. If people start giving up their work and losing their pension contributions, that's not helpful to anybody. So that is the big challenge. I don't really know what the answer to that is. At a parish level, of course, that's much less of a barrier.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks, Jan, for that. That's some really good points. Rosie?
I think when I joined Shropshire Council, it was very specific in terms of when its meetings were, times of day, etc., very structured. But I think with a new administration, we've actually done a bit of a culture change process on actually challenging when meetings do happen. So Jan's absolutely right. Cabinet does meet in the daytime, and the big councillor meeting that happens every 3 months does happen in the daytime. But the rest of the meetings, we are moving slowly towards late afternoon, early evening meetings, which does allow people to maintain other jobs that pay pensions and maintain their professional lives outside of council. So there are steps, but we should be representing what our community looks like, not just a very small part of it. So.
Exactly, and it's difficult, isn't it, to completely engineer a total cross section, and especially across party political representation as well, where there may be other processes in place, etc., which maybe represents the entire cross sectional demographic of where you live, your ward, your parish, or your town. It's really hard, but and it's hard to get the balance right. But yeah, I mean, I think the point you made, Jan. I think there was a report done by a previous government several years ago. You might remember, who found out that the average at that point age of a parish or any councillor, I think at any level of local government, was 60 or 61, approaching retirement age. But actually, they had the time to do it, as you say. So, in the end, we should all be grateful for, I guess, for people standing forward at all to do the job of councillor when you've got these different kind of socioeconomic kind of challenges to deal with. And people have families as well, of course, Jan, as you've rightly said as well, which is another challenge. And as Rosie has got. Lee, I'm going to give you final comments on final answer to Sylvia's question based on your brilliant work in Cornwall this year.
Right, no pressure. So diversity often well, I can talk about Cornwall and local and town and parish councils in particular. When we talk about diversity, the real issue that we're looking at is actually age. Diversity of age. People of working age don't come from. It's exactly what you just said. The average age of a councillor is someone in their 60s. There's nothing wrong with older people or retired people being councillors. That's all very welcome. What's not welcome is when it's all of one particular demographic, and because that isn't particularly representative. So how do we kind of turn that tanker around? Well, there are some things that we can kind of do to help, or there are things that are going to happen that will help. The use of social media is now extensive across the sector, which is great. However, for a lot of councils, social media means Facebook, and the average age of a Facebook user is probably the same as the average age of a councillor, to be honest with you. So we need to be looking at more innovative kind of channels to reach people. The government are going to change the law at some point in the next few years on allowing councils to meet in online and hybrid remote, and that helps those that are parents of young children or those that are working away, or whatever that may be. And those generally are going to be people that are not in their 60s, but people that are in their 30s, 40s, maybe 50s. And I guess a bit of a PR job. Again, what do town and parish councils do? Do they just sit around and talk about, complain about someone's planning application for a conservatory? Do they just talk about, shall we raise the allotment rent from £22.50 to £25 a year? That's not inspiring, and that's not what town and parish councils are. Parish councils can, undertake projects on community outreach, events, and of course things for youth services, play areas, all kinds of things. So getting that message out is another way of helping to increase diversity of candidates coming forward.
Brilliant. So it's really it's the way we communicate at different levels of local government with the different age groups and with the different sort of types of grouping that Jack mentioned, that whether we're talking about principal authority or parish and town council or non-political, party political, that will in the end increase candidacy, is what you're saying. You're all saying, and particularly you at the end there, Lee. No, that's brilliant. Listen, huge thanks to all of our speakers.